The Jag Bros are back. We are three brothers, JT, Jack, and Joey, and we bleed Jacksonville Jaguars. Love the Jaguars. Of course, the biggest news is that the Kansas City Chiefs won yet another Super Bowl, 3 in 5 years. Yes, the Chiefs do have a dynasty, but you know what? It's time to start building a Jacksonville Jaguars dynasty.
Yeah, the two biggest things I took from the game is number one, Trevor Lawrence is absolutely better than Brock Purdy. There are throws that he can make that Brock Purdy just can't. Not that Brock Purdy is a bad quarterback by any means. I think he's obviously done a lot of great things to put the 49ers in a position to win the Super Bowl. And number two, this is the first time a NFL quarterback with a max contract like Mahomes has been able to win the Super Bowl. So it'll be interesting as we're thinking about the roster construction of Kansas City and what Jacksonville may be facing here in 2 or 3 years if we give Trevor a extension similar to that.
Yeah, my two takeaways from the Super Bowl as well were our big men, the line has to be way better. We are soft and lazy. When you look at the Chiefs and the 49ers, they had some maulers. They both teams were either in the backfield or trying their absolute hardest not to let them in the back. Like, you could tell it was an absolute fight in the trenches. And I don't think any of our players would have been able to compete with those two lines. And then second, as you said, you look at Patrick Mahomes throwing it to just anybody and everyone. And I don't see that from Trevor. That has to change. I'm tired of seeing him only be able to throw to his favorite wide receivers. I understand, like, you can go to them, like Patrick goes to Travis Kelce in that, like, third down or you absolutely need it moment. But, like, during regular play and extending the play, don't be afraid to throw it to someone that you don't normally throw it to. I never saw him ever even look Cook's way. I didn't see him ever really look Evan Ingram in the end zone. Like, Trevor has to look at more than his favorite wide receivers. I think that is one of his biggest growths this year, has to be learning to throw it to other wide receivers.
All right, well, we're going to have a lot of fun on this episode. We're going to put on our GM hats today, and we're going to try to fix a lot of those biggest problems. The problems you were just talking about, Joey. We're going to look at 3 major position groups that the Jaguars either struggled in or we're going to potentially see a lot of moves in this offseason. So we're going to break down the Jaguars offensive line, the Jaguars receiver group, and then also the Jaguars defensive backs, and just give our suggestions. Hey, this is what we would like the Jaguars to do. Here's where we would like the Jaguars to be going into the 2024 season. So Joey, kick us off with a big problem group, the Jacksonville Jaguars offensive line. How do we fix it?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably easily the number one problem on the Jaguars team that has to get fixed. I mean, we've invested a lot of money into this offensive line, and for how poorly it's performed, it's really upsetting and sad. And it's time to kind of really make a change here. I think it's time for Cam to go. I understand that he is pretty much our only mauler on the offensive line and brings that energy. But that doesn't mean that we can't go out and go find that same energy for a cheaper price. Cam's going to be asking for way too much money for what he actually is worth. I think we have to cut him, get that $16 million. We don't even have enough money right now to put Josh Allen on the tag. So we need that money, and we need to go out and find some newer offensive linemen that will come and bring that energy. And with that, I think it's also time to cut Brandon Sheriff. He's aging. He's constantly hurt. He's been hurt pretty much both of the 2 seasons he's been here. I know that he's just kind of the shell of himself, the all-pro, pro bowler that we thought we were getting. It's just not him anymore. So we're going to have a lot of holes on this offensive line. Luckily, this draft is heavy on the offensive line prospects. I think we have to go there early, and I do think we'll also have to do some free agents on the offensive line because we don't want to have an entire offensive line full of rookies and people who are super young and don't know what they're doing. So it'll be very interesting to see what we do between the draft and free agency. Jack and JT, have you looked at any offensive line people so far yet? I'll get into the people I've looked into in a little bit, but wanted to see kind of your thoughts on who they should go with and what position they should go with on this offensive line.
Completely disagree with you on Cam Robinson. I mean, he's somebody that Jaguar fans continually want to try to run out of town, but he's the only guy who's consistently played well when he's been on the field in the regular season and in the
average.
postseason. He's played better than average.
People pump him up. I watch him get beat a lot, and he lost 8 games this season, 4 from injury and 4 from suspension. You really want to reward that? I'm
not saying reward that.
It's time for him to go.
I'm not saying reward that. First off, he's under contract, so it's not like we're having to decide whether we re-sign him. Yes, there's a decent cap hit if you do end up keeping him versus cutting him. But what are you going to do? You're all of a sudden going to, who is your veteran guy on the offense line? You'd have zero.
Have Walker Little still, and
Walker Little, you are talking about a guy who's barely been able to see the field the last 2 years. I mean, he's played 8 games total, it feels like, as a starter in the last 2 years. And so he's going to be your linchpin of your offensive line.
Walker Little has been really affected by the coaching, I believe. He's at left tackle, then he's at right tackle, and then he's at left guard. They need to select one position for this man, and so he can play it. They've thrown him everywhere. He doesn't even know what he's playing anymore. I do feel bad for Walker.
Newsflash, we have the exact same offensive line coach and the exact same offensive coordinator. So it's not like all of a sudden we're going to radically change our philosophy when it comes to that side of the ball. So with those things as constant, I'd be much more interested in restructuring Cam's deal if we're concerned about the cap hit this year. But you know what? You don't have to worry about paying Trevor this year. So it's fine if you overpay him. We're $10 to $15 million under cap last year. So you know what? Overpaying on Cam Robinson is fine, because anybody else you get in free agency, you're going to have to more than overpay. Jack, come on, set us straight here. Break the tie.
I don't know if I can break the tie. I kind of want to focus in more on Walker Little because it's an interesting one of, hey, it was only a few months ago, right at the beginning of the season, that we were talking about Walker Little as our best offensive lineman, not just best offensive tackle.
Please.
I'm not ready to throw in the towel on Walker Little. You drafted him really high. He is significantly cheaper. I'm curious your thoughts, Joey. You got your master plan here to rebuild the line. I do think we need Cam's energy, his passion, his fight, because he's really the only guy on this line that brings it. So I am concerned us losing him, that we're going to be even weaker. We're going to be even more woeful of it's just 5 guys just kind of out there for a cruise.
I understand what both of y'all are saying. I do believe that Walker Little was at the beginning our best offensive lineman. And when did it go bad for Walker Little? When did he start not playing as well? It's when they moved him to guard. I think they messed him up. They messed up his footwork. They messed up.
He also got injured there. So
he got injured. Exactly. Like, it seems like he is actually a very good offensive lineman. I understand we don't have the long record to see if it's actually true or not, but that's just the way the NFL's moving. You don't have that many players that have had that huge track record anymore. You just got to kind of take the gamble, and I think that he may still be worth it. And if not, you can go out in a free agent or draft. This is a heavy offensive line draft class, and I believe Cam Robinson and this team feeds on, oh, I'm so scared to lose him. We won't ever find someone who can replace that energy. But I do believe that we could find someone to replace that energy. Just because one person had it doesn't mean that we'll never have it again. I think that you have to walk away from Cam Robinson when the cut is $16 million. It's really hurtful when you go look at who do the Jaguars pay the most. And it's Cam Robinson, and it's just not star-worthy ability that he gives you, where he needs to be the top paid player.
But that position requires that type of payment, even for slightly above average type of players. Like I said, Juwan Taylor just got $20 million from the Chiefs in the open market free agency last year. So,
and do you not think that they're kicking themselves for that?
I think that they
No,
just
'cause
won
they
a
won the
Super Bowl.
Bowl.
They won the
Back
Super
to back.
Bowl. And so like I think
Yes,
they're like,
and that
you
kind
know,
of just shows you how like right tackle's not the most important position.
well, I mean, left tackle is arguably even more important. And so like
Of course it is.
Look, if we're having this conversation next year, do we
And that's
re-sign
why they
Cam
didn't put
Robinson?
Jawan Taylor at left tackle. They paid him left tackle money, realized that he wasn't left tackle potential, so they had to move him to right tackle. They kicking themselves because they paid him that much money. I promise you that.
That's fine, but they won the Super Bowl and they're probably the favorite to win the Super Bowl again next year. Who is this other great offensive tackle that you have in your mind that we're going to be able to get for $5 million or so?
You move Anton Harrison to left tackle. He was your best, most consistent offensive line.
You're the
throughout
one that just
year.
said quit moving everybody around. He actually played
Yeah,
consistently
because he
well
actually
right
played
tackle.
left tackle in college. You know that he can do it. He picked up a position he has never played before in right tackle.
And there was a
and
huge
showed you
learning
that he
curve for
could
the
do
first
it.
6
So imagine
weeks.
him playing his actual position, left tackle, and how good he could be.
Never played at left tackle a single snap in the NFL. All of a sudden, we're saying, well, why can't you just play this position? That's exactly the thing that you were just criticizing our coaching staff of doing.
I'm criticizing that they moved him to right tackle when he's never played it before. And luckily, he was good enough to pick it up and actually be good. This is a position he's played from high school and college. Like his entire life, he's played left tackle. I don't think he just forgot it in 1 year. He knows how to play left tackle. He'll have an entire offseason also to get ramped back up at left tackle. I absolutely think he can play left tackle. You go draft a right tackle where you know that it's not as important to be amazing as a right tackle. You go get a rookie, or you can even move Walker Little and just see how he does at right tackle. I don't know what you want to do there. You can have them fight over the position, Walker Little and the rookie that you draft at right tackle. But Anton Harrison would be your left tackle if Cam Robinson left.
I will say this draft class is loaded at right tackle. So that's my big question is what do you do at left tackle? So I like keeping Cam. Look, I know it's crazy expensive, but it does make me nervous of having two very young guys at offensive tackle. And look, we haven't even gotten to the interior offensive line, which is even worse than the offensive tackle position. But I like keeping Cam as more of a mentor for, you know, whoever you draft, whoever you get as a young guy in free agency. But I get, look, that's a $16-17 million mentor. That's very, very expensive. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see what they do. But now we got to get to what are you going to do about the interior offensive line? Because we couldn't run the ball. The last 8-9 games, we're averaging less than 3 yards a carry, even with the number one or number two running back in the league, the guy who's making more tackles miss. So what do we do? Because we can't run it on 3rd and short. We can't run it on 4th and short. How do we fix this terrible interior offensive line?
Well, we try to re-sign Ezra Cleveland. I feel like that's your best bet. He won't be too expensive, I don't believe. So that kind of solidifies your left guard. And then you got to get rid of Luke Fortner. This is what I have the most frustration with this organization is how they can sit there and be happy with Luke Fortner, be almost praising Luke Fortner for how good apparently he's doing, but you have everybody and their mom telling you how he is on his butt half the time, looking like a chicken with his head cut off because he has no idea what he's doing. He's running around missing blocks, not even blocking anybody most of the time, just standing there around. It's a sad performance to watch him even play football right now. And the fact that this coaching staff and people talking about how they have trust in him, I understand you don't want to get up there and just rag on him or tear him down. And like he's under contract, so he's going to be on the team at least, whether he starts or not, I don't know. You got to at least put some fire under him somewhat. Be like, yes, we understand that Luke Fortner's not playing so well. We'll bring in some competition to see if he can like fight for his starting position. But like this whole coddling of Luke Fortner is so weird to me. What do y'all think about that? I mean, it blows my mind how differing opinions can be between all your fans and analysis people and everyone telling you how bad he is. And then you on the other side being like, no, I think he's actually fairly good. Like, how do y'all feel about it?
Yeah, we probably talked about it to death, but the reality is we're sitting here in the middle of February and we still technically haven't done anything. Now, free agency hasn't started. and we'll see. I mean, we're not going to cut him. We pay him just over $1 million a year, but I think every Jaguars fan certainly wants Luke Fortner to be the backup or the third string. I think a lot of the politics this year was just we didn't have anyone else. Like looking at the depth chart, now I know Shatley could have potentially played, but technically the depth chart was a guy named Darrell Williams as our backup center who I don't know that I've ever seen take a snap as a Jaguar, and maybe I just missed one.
He did in preseason, but I mean, it was like he's better. Luke Fortner is better than that.
Right. So I guess I just say, we only talked up Fortner because we had no other option, but now we have options. And this is why we're doing this episode is, okay, it's time to rebuild. And I know every Jaguars fan favorite right now is Jackson Powers Johnson, center from Oregon, JPJ, who, we all thought we were going to get in the second round. And now people are so hyped on him from the Senior Bowl, saying that he may go even before 17, which is wild because that'd be the first center that high in over 20 years since the 1990s. But there's no question you've got to address it at some level, whether it's Connor Williams, the center from the Dolphins, who's 26 and a free agent, or in the draft. But Luke Fortner can't start for you next year unless there's some crazy narrative that no one heard about and he was massively injured, because he was the worst part of our offensive line, no question.
He was ranked 33rd out of centers. That means that there was someone who didn't even start for the team that was better than him, which is so sad. And I absolutely agree. You're not going to cut him, but if I don't hear they brought in someone who challenges him, like the only way I could ever see him starting is he somehow it all clicks and he gets a lot stronger and plays like the people thought he would actually play when we drafted him. And last year was just a fluke. But if he doesn't actually like have one, if not two people come in and challenge him heavily, I'm going to be so disappointed in Doug Peterson and this entire organization, because that will be a complete lapse. What do you think, JT?
Well, I think we're very opinionated on the offensive line, and as much fun as it is to talk about it, I think most people want to actually focus on the receivers, which there's a ton of question marks with some of the things that we could do from a free agency and a draft perspective. When three of our starting five-ish receivers are going to be right now free agents. Yeah, obviously the big one is Calvin Ridley. Also Jamal Agnew and Tim Jones are all three of those free agents going into the offseason here. So the Jaguars receiving room, I would say maybe slightly underperformed what Jaguar fans wanted, but certainly overperformed.
Slightly. Well, maybe it was just me on the Calvin Ridley hype train, but I remember that Devontae Adams interview saying he's going to be top 5. I don't think that happened, and I was off on that.
Yeah, well, fine. It's below what I think Calvin Ridley wanted, but you still had a guy who had over 1,000 yards receiving, had 8 or so touchdowns, and drew another 200 plus yards in penalties. So you're looking at a guy who contributed about 1,300 yards or so. So was he the difference maker that I think some people wanted him? No. His age also is a factor in this free agency, because if you look at most sites with the free agents, most of them have him around 4th or 5th best wide receiver option available. Now, some of those, like Michael Pittman, will most certainly be re-signed by their teams, in that case, the Colts. So what would you guys like to see us do at this position, knowing that our tight end position at least is shored up with Evan Ingram?
Well, I mean, with the Calvin Ridley situation, I just wonder how much of his stats are added on because Zay Jones missed half the year and Christian Kirk also missed half the year. So you're going to get a lot more targets because of that. And like, I understand his stats weren't that bad, but I can't get over the eye test because I wasn't blown away. And frankly, I was a little frustrated with the eye test, constantly looking like running the wrong routes, constantly not looking like he was 100% bought in, like walking routes, giving up on plays. Like the eye test, I can't get over. I'm happy to keep him, but I don't want to overpay for him, and I don't want to overhype him either, because there was still a lot of issues with Calvin Ridley that I feel like a lot of people have already forgotten about in the last couple weeks.
Well, I think there's two sides to that coin, right? You could say because those guys were out, he got more targets, but he also got more attention from the defense. And so I think if you actually saw all the folks on the field at the same time, there's a chance he would have been able to do more. Now, my biggest gripe week over week over week is I don't really think we're utilizing him the best to his ability, especially with his route tree. The amount of times we see that that 10-yard comebacker or a 15-yard out, and that seemed to be like what 90% of his routes were, which again, I think is frustrating considering I think he has some elite route running abilities. But net, I do agree with you, Joey. I'm relatively net neutral. If you told me tomorrow, hey, we re-signed him, fine. If you told me that we let him walk, fine. I would probably be the most frustrated if we actually tag him because talking about overpaying, I don't think he's worth tagging because now you're saying you're going to put it all together for one season and for some sort of Super Bowl run. And I don't really see that for Calvin Ridley. You either sign him for a 3-year deal where you're slightly overpaying him or you let him walk, in my opinion.
It sounds like Joey's coming a little more to my side of, I've been saying even 2/3 of the way through the season, I think this is the year that we let him walk. And look, I like the trade. It was very complicated. Part of the reason a lot of people want to tag him is that way we don't lose the 2nd-round pick, and instead we only lose a 3rd-round pick for Ridley. I think it was worth every shot. And, we've commented a lot on Balky's, bad moves where he swung and missed, especially in the draft. But I like taking the shot on Ridley. My deal is a lot of what Joey said. I felt like he runs the wrong route in a costly interception very late in the season. It's not like it's week 5, it was week 16. And my other biggest concern is he got a ton of targets and he just didn't have a lot of catches. Anytime you have your wide receiver 1 have a completion rating of about 56, 57%, that's horrible. That's the lowest on the team. And look, I keep saying I think you let Ridley walk, but a lot of it should come down to Trevor Lawrence. And it sounds like it is. It sounds like the Jaguars front office is giving Trevor Lawrence a lot to say. If Trevor says, hey, look, I think it just was some rust, which is crazy to me that you have 4 months of rust because it looked worse at the end. But anyways, if Trevor Lawrence said, hey, I want Calvin Ridley back, if Calvin Ridley agrees to a team-friendly, not a crazy deal, then yeah, look, I'm fine with it.
To the drop point, Jack, it's a little bad, but I don't think it's as bad as you think because Mike Evans also has about that same completion rate and he drops the ball a lot. And he is a Pro Bowler looking at possibly being a Hall of Famer. So the drops aren't the hugest problem. A thing that I think a lot of people have overlooked is in his exit interview, I couldn't believe he said this, was how he didn't even want to go learn like another offense. He barely even learned our offense. So I really comes into question is how truly bought in is Calvin Ridley? It seems a little bit like he's lazy and he doesn't even really want to learn plays. Like I understand he still has the talent and he still can run the ball and catch with the ball, but the passion seems to be out of him. I don't know.
I disagree.
I would rather have someone go 120% and not have all the talent than someone who has 100% talent and only goes about 60%.
His comment was he was trying to position himself to stay on this team. He likes what he has. He likes the team. And we saw a year-over-year improvement for Kirk, too, before he got injured and being on the same page with Trevor. So I think that's more of what he's saying than I don't want to, quote, learn a new playbook because I never learned this playbook. I don't agree with the lazy take at all. I think for him, I do think there was an adjustment to getting back up to game speed, having taken essentially a 2-year break from the game.
Was this his first season playing 17 games? I do wonder that as well.
It was also his first season playing 17 games, but it's also his first season. Like he took like 500 plus days off between games. And so like, think about that. Like, think about like if you take even a 3 or 4 week break from going to the gym and then you go back in there and you're trying to hit some sort of like high intensity type workout, all of a sudden you don't have the same speed. You don't have the same stamina. You don't have the same stuff like that. And multiply that times 10. And that's probably the type of experience you're seeing in the NFL. So like, I'm cautious to start saying he's taking plays off or he doesn't have the heart. I think he does. I think he wants to do it, I think there's an adjustment there. And if you look at what else is most likely going to be available, you mentioned Mike Evans already. He's going to be there. Obviously, T. Higgins is going to be there, who's got his own drop and injury problems. Marquise Brown from the Cardinals is most likely going to be available. Gabe Davis, Tyler Boyd from the Bengals, Curtis Samuel, Kendrick Bourne. There's not a whole lot of names that like excite you. And so, like I said, I would rather, if we're going to resign Ridley, do it to a 2 or 3 year deal. Don't do a single year deal because it's not really going to buy you anything in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about the single year deal is you kind of learn if it was rust or if it's laziness, because I do think that there's a possibility that take off that many days, you don't realize how long the season is and tired, rust, and all that. But I do believe there is a possibility that the lazy part could be also the answer. And that's what that 1 year deal buys you is this truly rust or is this truly laziness? And you kind of find out, and then you decide to make a long-term deal versus making a long-term deal, betting on, oh, I think it's just rust. And then you find out it is laziness.
I will give Ridley credit, though. He did play all 17 games, which a lot of Jaguars this year did not. So I do have to give him credit. Look, he did score 8 touchdowns. To me, that was the biggest thing. And really had 9, because if you remember that Ravens game, he had that knee in. We didn't review because for whatever reason. But, he was the best red zone target. So I still think you walk away because to me, there's questions of his toughness as well. He couldn't get physical to the line. He looked smaller than I thought he would. I still love us going, whether it's first or second round. And I get we have a lot of needs, but if you can get a big guy, because we just don't have any big receivers. Kirk is not a big guy. Parker Washington is not a big guy. Tim Jones and Elijah Cooks are big, but they never get on the field. So you need a big-bodied receiver. And yeah, I mean, I don't love throwing a max offer at Higgins or Mike Evans, who's too old. But I do think you have a shot at a 6'3", 6'4", 215, 220-pound guy in the first 2 rounds that could finally be, and could we say it, finally a wide receiver number 1 in Jacksonville after not having one for 20 years since Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardell. So, look, I get we've missed a ton on wide receiver in the draft, but I think it's time to draft again a wide receiver high up because Holmes and Kelsey, look, I get he's not a wide receiver, but that combo has been effective. And part of the reason, well, really most of the reason that they have a dynasty and 3 Super Bowl wins and a shot to make NFL history of back-to-back-to-back Super Bowl wins.
Yeah, if there's one under the radar player to keep your eyes on from a free agency receiver, Mark, who I think you could probably get cheap with a decently high upside, I would say it's Darnell Mooney. In his second season, he put up over 1,000 yards and 80 receptions. Like watching him in Chicago, I think he's pretty decent. And I think it's just been a disaster at quarterback the last few years. If they walk from him, I wouldn't mind trying to make him work if you end up letting Ridley walk. He's also only 26 years old. So he should be in the prime of his in the prime of his career. And there's been some comparisons to like an Emmanuel Sanders type of guy. So like if he comes in and could be a little bit more of a difference maker for us, than if we do let Ridley walk.
Well, even if we let Ridley walk, there's also a lot of talk about cutting Zay Jones for the cap savings that you would earn. What do y'all think about letting him go?
Stupid. Like, I mean, why are we cutting every single position when we don't need to yet before you're paying a quarterback? But even when you're already 10 to 15 million under and you're letting some other higher price tag guys go from free agency that you're no longer going to have to pay. And I do agree with you letting Sheriff walk. So I don't know why you have to just keep letting everybody walk.
Well, we keep saying under cap, but I think all of us want to sign Josh Allen to a big deal. So there goes all the cap, and you got to sign draft picks, which there goes the cap too. So unless we let a lot of guys go, we're certainly going to be over cap, assuming that we, bring Josh Allen back, which would be crazy to not, the reason you would cut Zay, and I don't know if it would just depend on how aggressive you were in free agency, if you were going to make that move. But if you make that move, it's just because, look, at the end of the day, the Jaguars were 9-8. and we fell apart, and we don't know who the Jacksonville Jaguars are. Are we the team that was 8-3 and we just had injuries and problems and concerns and we can get back on the right track? Or are we the team that collapsed and we limp into this next season with a lot of the same players? And that's why you can't do what you did from 2022 to 2023, which is not make many moves. This roster needs a lot of moves. I'm not saying Zay Jones is the right one, but I don't love us bringing back a whole lot. Look, I don't like us bringing back Jamal Agnew. We talked about this last episode, but Parker Washington, he's 7 years younger. He's significantly cheaper. And for all the return hype that we give Agnew, Parker Washington had a better punt return average and pretty close to the exact same kick return average. And I think he's a better wide receiver than Agnew. So we can't just run back a lot of these same guys just because we like them. I think we need to make a lot of changes.
I went back and actually rewatched some of Parker Washington's returns, and they were better than I remembered, fully against moving on from Agnew and replacing kind of him with Parker Washington. They do have very similar attributes, and it's a much cheaper kind of version of him. So I don't hate that, and I do agree with JT. I do think cutting Zay Jones is actually kind of stupid, because he is someone that Trevor has great chemistry with. And you forget, before his injuries, he was actually the number one target in the red zone, making really incredible toe-tapping catches. And everyone was talking about him during the off season and training camp as if he could actually be the number one over Calvin Ridley. That's how well he was doing. So I don't think it would be smart cutting him. You see if actually he could be better than you think. I think he was just plagued with injury last year and he lost a little bit of his speed, but I think he could get it back.
Let's do this with our wide receiver group, because I'm curious. 2024 season, let's say it's September 2024. Who do you want the Jaguars starting 3 or starting 4 wide receivers to be?
Oh, gosh. I'll start with Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and then I'm going to say we let Calvin Ridley walk and we get a wide receiver in the first or second round. And I think that'll be the third person starting. I think it'll be Kirk first, Zay Jones second, rookie third.
I would concur with that. And then I would personally re-sign Agnew as my 4th wide receiver.
Yeah, I think we're going to all be pretty similar. And I'm actually going to jump on JT. I like that thought with Darnell Mooney. I think he brings a speed element that, especially if we do let Agnew walk, I think he's, of course, an improvement. He's going to be a more expensive improvement. But I like running out Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, potentially a guy like Darnell Mooney, give us a speed element. And then I love us going a big-bodied receiver in the draft, whether it's Xavier Legette, who I think realistically could fall to us now in the second round because he did measure a little bit shorter at the Senior Bowl at 6'1", but he's still huge. He's still 225 pounds, still crazy fast. And so I think if we got him at pick 48, I think you can ease him into a very good wide receiver group. I would feel confident about Kirk, Zay Jones, Mooney, and Xavier Legette.
Love it. Jack, take us to the defense.
All right, well, let's look at another problem area for the Jaguars, an area where we need a lot of work as well, and that's the defensive backs. And so again, as we're doing this, hopefully y'all are having a ton of fun too. Give us your thoughts. We're going to engage with you on Twitter and other places at the Jag Bros, but the secondary was bad. Look, we were 26th in pass yards given up, more than 256 yards per game, 26th in pass touchdowns given up with 27 total, 1.6 touchdowns per game. And a lot of guys that you're like, no way that they burn us. They burnt us. Joe Flacco, an old Joe Flacco, burnt us. Jake Browning, the guy who barely played at all in the NFL, burnt us. And then Baker Mayfield, of course, torched us late in the season as well. So here's what the Jaguars currently have at defensive back. You've got CB1, Tyson Campbell, CB2, Darius Williams, and then you have the slot corner Herndon, and then you have your 2 safeties, Rayshon Jenkins and Andre Sisco. Look, I think you bring back Williams 100%. There's some talk again about, well, can you save more cap by cutting him? No, he was your only good corner. He played at a very good level with 4 picks, 12 pass breakups, a pick 6, and 2 forced fumbles. So you 100% bring him back. he should be in your starting lineup at corner. And Tyson Campbell, PFF rated him at 61.5 in 2023, which, just to give you the gap, Darius Williams was a 79.3, so almost an 18-point swing. He was bad last year, but I think a lot of that's injury, and he was so good 2022. You have to take a shot and see, can he come back at an elite level next year? The slot corner is one I want to admit I was wrong about. We were talking about this in our last episode. I hope you'll go back and listen. Just all the Jaguars free agents. Do we keep? Do we cut? Do we sign? Do we franchise tag them? And I said Trey Herndon, I think we bring back on a team-friendly deal. But looking at more of his numbers and just watching and remembering him, I think you let him walk. You can get an upgrade at slot corner. He had 0 interceptions. He had 46 tackles. And here's the big number that jumps out to me. When targeted, he gave up 78.9% completion rate. So 4 out of 5 balls thrown Herndon's way is going to be a completion for the other team. So I think either you're going to throw Antonio Johnson, who came on really strong as a rookie, a guy that I think is either going to play slot corner, or you may actually see him shift into the safety position and fill in Rayshon Jenkins' position. He had a very strong season, even in the limited playing time. He was 73.8 PFF grade, which marks him as the second best corner already as a rookie. And he's got great size, 6'3", 205. He's going to keep getting better and better. He, to me, should be the future of the Jaguars secondary. So looking at cornerbacks 1 through 3, Williams, Campbell, Johnson, Herndon, what would y'all like to see the Jaguars do at cornerback next year?
I think the Jaguars need to draft a cornerback. We're going to lose Trey Herndon most likely. He is not under contract. I just don't see it happening with all the other holes that we're going to have to fill and other people we have to re-sign. I just think that he might become a casualty to it all. And I think you have to go out and draft a replacement, and you have to do it. Most likely it's going to be the 3rd or early 4th. We have 2 4th-round picks. I could see us going corner there. I understand some of us really want to go corner 1st round, but it's not that big of a need, I think. But it's a pretty heavy cornerback class in the draft. I know we're not going to move on from Campbell now, but we do need to draft someone who can play slot, who, if Campbell isn't what we think he is, that could roll into his position and we can let him go in the next year or so. But definitely not moving on from Campbell now. Like, he definitely was injured and we need to see if he can come back. But if not, we definitely need to draft a corner to go fill in the slot corner for Trey Herndon, because I just don't see us re-signing him, unfortunately.
Jack, I think you nailed it. You put Antonio Johnson in the slot corner. He played very well. It's a difficult position to play.
No. Antonio Johnson's going to be starting for Rayshon Jenkins. Let's be real.
But
that's why they drafted him.
Well, not necessarily, because he played both. He played both nickel and strong safety in college, and so he could play either one of those positions. And if he's actually doing well at slot corner, which again I think is maybe the hardest place to play on the defense, especially with the emergence of the slot receivers, I would love for him to be that standout guy. Herndon was terrible last year, or at least very below average. So I don't know what you guys were talking about. I would love to see him walk.
I'm saying walk. Yeah. I was saying I was wrong on him.
The other thing we've heard in the last couple of weeks is that our new defensive coordinator wants to be pressing the ball, wants to be playing man more, which is kind of interesting because it's very different than I would say how a lot of defenses are deciding to play in the NFL. In the last few years, you're seeing a lot of high 2-man shells, high cover 3, high zones, because it tends to lead to more interceptions. It tends to force teams to go slowly down the field, which a lot of these quarterbacks that like throwing the ball down the field, it's frustrating them, right? We saw that happen several times against Caldwell's team. And then the other thing is I just don't think we actually have the horses. Herndon, one of the biggest knocks against him is his ability to play man-to-man coverage. So if we are going to be doing a lot more of that, I think there's zero chance we end up re-signing him. Darius Williams, who I agree, Jack, at times was playing at a Pro Bowl level corner this year, and certainly was our best one in 2023. He is not quite as fast as some of the other corners you would like to see. And so if you were to draft a corner in the 1st or 2nd round, that may be the guy you end up replacing in the long run, because you've seen flashes of greatness from Campbell. You've seen flashes of terribleness from Campbell, especially last year. And you want to talk about another guy who continually got burned last year. Now he was injured, but I mean, it's a very head scratching strategy to try to deploy with the current personnel on the roster. So either we're going to have to change the strategy that he wants to do to fit these pieces, or we have to get new pieces, or he's going to actually try to employ that strategy, and it's going to be an absolute disaster on the secondary.
Hopefully no disaster, because the Jaguars secondary has not been good in a while. But I will give Nielsen credit here. Look, in the interview, and you see it with the Falcons, you see it on every defense, he's not glued to one strategy. He's not even a guy that says, hey, I'm 4-3 or 3-4. He's very much about what fits best for the player personnel. So I don't think he's going to force something that's not there, but he does need better talent. There's no question. Look, we keep just kind of putting a Band-Aid on this bad secondary and hoping it just magically gets better. No, we need to address the secondary in some way.
Yes, but I also believe this secondary was victim of some terrible Mike Caldwell coaching in the secondary. The idea that the reason we got burned by so many backup quarterbacks is because we gave up whatever you wanted underneath, and teams figured that out and exploited the heck out of it towards the end of the season. We are 10 yards off the ball. Cisco's 30 yards off the ball. We are playing in no man's land way far back, thinking that every play was going to be a 30-yard bomb. No, the problem was people realized we were doing that, threw it always underneath, and then they would get yak yards afterwards because we decided that we weren't going to tackle at the end of the season. But it was a terrible, terrible idea that we were going to play so far off and just let whoever we wanted catch the ball in front of us, and then we would try to make a tackle. That's not how you play defense, and that's not how you play defense in the NFL. I really, really admire Ryan Nielsen for understanding that and saying we are going to play up on the ball. He didn't say that we're always going to be playing man. They may be up on the ball and then go out and at the snap of the ball may move back into zone or something like that. But you can't just sit back there and not think that a team's going to draw up a scheme, see that you're 10 yards off the ball, and they can do whatever they want underneath you. You have to be able to disguise it. And that's what he was talking about, playing up and then moving back or changing it up. Mike Caldwell didn't disguise anything. He was the most showy defensive coordinator I've ever seen. And I do think that our players actually played better up front. Cisco, as you saw at the beginning of the season, was a much better safety when he was way closer to the plays than when he was playing 30 yards back and then had to run 20 yards in to actually make a tackle. It was terrible defensive calling, I believe, on Mike Caldwell. And I think that this is actually a really smart move with Ryan Nielsen and playing a lot closer.
Well, I mean, the biggest issue with the Jaguars was the consistent times we're giving up 30 or 40 and sometimes 80-yard plays on the back end. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the underneath stuff, but in my mind, it's like, okay, if you are going to play the
How
shell
many times
zone,
were we burned? Honestly, about two or three.
Probably
Only
the most,
2 or 3 times.
2 or 3 per game. I mean, you saw Jamar Chase go 80 yards. You saw Tank Dell go both games, huge plays against us. One of them, fortunately, we got a holding call.
It happened a few times.
Brandon Ayuk did it. So did like every other. So did Cleveland. Like every single game, you're giving up
deep on us. What are you talking about?
You have no idea what you're talking about. There's this
Joe
revisionist
Flacco
history.
Threw everything underneath. Jake Browning threw everything underneath.
No, he did. He had the 85-yard bomb down the sidelines where we're playing press man coverage on Chase, and Chase just burns Campbell for 80 yards. It's like Jaguar fans forget the fact that we were horrible. We were bottom 5 in the league on giving up big plays. And so if we're going to play some shell, then then you got to actually execute it. And so that's why I was frustrated with the team. And again, every time we tried to play some level of press man, they would burn us deep over the top. And so that's my concern with the current personnel. The
You're just
games we were
wrong,
throwing
TP.
underneath, like the Saints game, where Kamara gets 14 catches, which is unreal for a running back. But oh, by the way, we won that game. Oh, by the way, we were able to hold them. And so the defense wasn't perfect. I think a lot of that was personnel and not necessarily scheme.
Okay, well then why is Cisco 30 yards back and was out of every
because he
single play?
also had injuries. Like, look, I just don't like this whole narrative that all of our struggles and failures was Mike Caldwell and Ryan Nielsen is going to somehow save the day. Look, I like the hire. I think it's solid.
I wasn't saying that. I wasn't saying all.
But the reality, Joe,
Caldwell.
are you going to run man coverage with a 5'9" Darius Williams 100% of the time?
No,
Or
I never said that. I said you had to disguise it. You can move up front and then bail out. There's ways to disguise whether you're going to go to zone or whatever. You don't have to sit there and just doing nothing in your zone. You have to be able to disguise, move it around, change
Clearly,
it up.
they disguised it if they led the league or it was top 3 in the league multiple times in turnovers. And a lot of those were interceptions. So, like, you can't say, oh, we just played this vanilla back end defense that gave the offense everything that they wanted, because that's just factually not accurate over the last 2 years.
He did it in the beginning, and then you could tell it changed in the end.
At the end, the team was riddled with injuries. The more injured side of the ball was certainly on the defense. And then
the lack of depth was on defense too.
Exactly, because you made no moves in free agency or in the draft on the defensive side of the ball. And so now we're saying, how do we got half our guys were injured, and then they come back and they didn't play as well, or they came back too soon, like you pointed out multiple times.
Yes.
And all these people that are saying like, oh, we should have put Walker on the inside, maybe, but then that means you're forced to play Chase on 75 to 80% of snaps, which we already know would be a liability because you have literally nobody else on the outside. So even if he wanted to put him on the inside, we didn't have the personnel to do that and do that effectively for a long time.
I was not blaming all of it on Mike Caldwell. I do blame a lot of the secondary on Mike Caldwell, but yes, we are very deficient on talent on the side of defense. We have not been drafting defense for the last 2 years. We barely get any defense in the free agents, and when we have, they're normally misses. Like Foley Fatukasi, maybe one of the worst defensive tackles I've seen. Big old miss there. We're only drafting linebackers for some reason. We just have a stockpile of them drafted up. Like, yes, I understand the defense is woefully mismanaged, but I can't do anything about the talent. I can say we need to draft this person or whatever. That can't change. Ryan Nielsen is the only change, and I am excited about that change.
I think he will bring a new energy, a new aggressive approach. That's his big word, is we're going to be more aggressive. I just think we need a lot more personnel to fit that. Honestly, on both sides of the ball.
Definitely.
But that's neither here nor there. So here's a couple of the targets I like in the draft. First round, Terrion Arnold, if he falls to us, he's a stud out of Alabama. Second round, love TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. Big physical corner, as you'll see with my third round guy, Kyrie Jackson from Oregon. So I think we need a bigger guy. I think we need a good guy that's going to play predominantly man coverage. And here's a free agent I love that would be shocking if the Jaguars did it. But I think he's going to be cheap because he is older. But that's Stephon Gilmore. Yes, he's 33 years old, but I just think we need a veteran presence for a lot of these young guys like Antonio Johnson, Tyson Campbell, Andre Cisco. All these guys are 23 and younger. Let's go get a $3, $4, $5 million deal with Gilmore and let him play in the secondary, let him help, and also coach a lot of our good young secondary guys.
Man, I wanted Gilmore back when Buffalo re-signed him about 6 years ago. I wouldn't hate getting him to a 2-year deal as well.
A lot of big moves. I've said it a bunch. This is going to be a big offseason for the Jaguars. We have some key dates coming up. So February 20th, the day of this drop, starts the opening of franchise tags. So be on the lookout for what are the Jaguars going to do. Are we going to tag Josh Allen? Are we going to tag Calvin Ridley? Are we going to tag neither? That is going to be a big decision. And then we're just a couple weeks away from the NFL Combine as well. Of course, it's going to be a big draft for the Jaguars too.
This is going to be the biggest kind of off season for the Jaguars. And all of y'all need to be watching, every fan, because if we miss right now and the floor collapses, it is going to take years to rebuild. And we could honestly lose the Jaguars in Jacksonville if we mess up this offseason with the whole stadium deals still out there and trying to get that done. This is a very, very important offseason. So if you're a Jaguars fan, be watching. We'll be keeping you informed on what's happening, and we will keep you informed on where we're looking at in the draft pick, what we do in free agency, who we pick up. It's going to be very important. So make sure that you follow us, get notifications on when we drop new episodes, because you'll want to hear what we have to say about the Jaguars this offseason, because we got to get back to where we were going. We need to be moving forward. And I want y'all to like, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed us. If not, don't rate us at all. And can't wait to have you again on our next episode, where we will discuss more on the draft and more positions that we will need to fill. And until next time,
Duval.